and gaining recognition for works such as Dominique Pamplemousse and Coffee, A Misunderstanding, they're currently in the process of co-founding a worker co-op game studio called Soft Chaos with two of their very good friends, while at the same time working on a solo album of short games titled Squinky and the Squinkettes Present Second Puberty. It's an absolute honor and pleasure to have Squinky on board this year, and I'm very excited to hear their talk. So please make Squinky feel welcome, and I'll now pass it over to Squinky.
Hello. Thank you, Freeplay, for having me. Yeah, so it's certainly been a time, hasn't it? Yeah, there's just, yeah, it's been a pretty overwhelming year and a half. I don't even know what time is anymore. But yeah, so I was like just thinking about what I can possibly say at this keynote that I have the opportunity to be presenting at. And after thinking about it for a while, I noticed that it's been about 15 years since I first started working in games and getting paid for it. And 15 years is a much longer time than it really feels like. It feels so long ago, but it also doesn't feel that long ago. And to have been making games for that long is, yeah, I mean, making games for even longer than that, but like making games as a career. So I decided I'd like do kind of an unconventional format for this keynote. I do a lot of work in awkward vulnerability, for lack of a better term. And I decided, like, in the spirit of being awkwardly vulnerable, I would write a letter to my 20-year-old self from the year 2006 and read it out loud to you all. And that will be the keynote. So I hope you enjoy it. Dear 20-year-old Squinky, I'm not entirely sure how best to explain this, but I am your 35-year-old self, writing to you from the year 2021. I'm also very aware that because of the limits of a human being's perception of time, there is no possible way to communicate with you in a way that you can coherently understand. Nevertheless, I have a lot I want to say to you, and I hope that what I have to say reaches you somehow, even if it's just in the form of amorphous feelings buried deep in your subconscious. From your perspective, it is the year 2006, and you are working at your first job in the video game industry, an internship at Telltale Games. I know that this is the big break you'd been hoping for ever since you first learned it was possible to have a career making video games. And I want you to know I'm proud of you for making it here. The rest of this year is going to be an amazing time where you will learn so much, not just about making games, but about being alive and existing in the world. You are, after all, not just working your first real job in video games. You're also living independently from your parents for the first time ever. There are things you finally get to start figuring out about yourself now that you have the space and distance to do so. And though all the pieces won't quite click together for another several years, you're beginning to get more of a sense of what actually feels good and right to you, rather than what people all your life have told you you should be feeling. By the way, you may be wondering why I'm calling you Squinky and not your real name. This is a very deliberate choice on my part. Even if you aren't consciously aware of it yet, I know that your birth name has always made you feel a bit off, for lack of a better term. You have tried to force yourself to embrace it and will for a time continue to do so, but it will never feel right, and it will never feel like yours. I also know that ever since you started using Squinky as your internet pseudonym when you were 13, this silly nonsense name that was a throwaway line in The Secret of Monkey Island, it's brought you this undescribable joy that may not make sense to anyone else, but is still very important in your understanding of yourself. One day, you will finally figure out that your name, like many other things about you, is something you're allowed to change if and when you want to. So why am I writing to you? Well, here in the year 2021, I've been asked to give the opening keynote for the Free Play Independent Games Festival in Melbourne, Australia. Sadly, I don't get to actually be in Australia right now, and as of 2021, still have never been there, though I hope that will change someday. Instead, I'll be speaking from a video call from my current home in Montreal, a city you haven't yet visited but will in about 8 years. And you'll have so much fun, you won't ever want to leave. Also, video calls are a thing now because it's the future. No flying cars though, which is probably for the best. Anyway, the Free Play people told me I could talk about whatever I wanted for this keynote, which feels like it should be easier than it actually is. They've definitely given me more than enough time to think about what I want to talk about, but of course I've been procrastinating, a familiar habit you never quite figure out how to overcome no matter how hard you try. And it's getting dangerously close to the deadline. The truth is, I'm not sure what I can possibly say right now that's important enough for a keynote. For a little bit of context, since there's no possible way you can know this yet, do you remember SARS from a few years ago? Well, at the end of 2019, it got a sequel, and it was really bad. Like, I don't mean direct-to-video Return of Jafar bad. I mean so bad it became a pandemic. For most of 2020 and a good portion of 2021, basically all of life as we knew it got canceled. Everyone all over the world had to stay home and limit in-person contact with other people, lest we allow the virus to spread exponentially and cause more needless death. Maybe you're hearing this and thinking, oh, this sounds easy. Staying in and playing video games and only talking to people online sounds wonderful. But as we soon found out, those things are only as wonderful as they are when you also get to go out and do things and experience the world outside of the confines of a screen. And being trapped at home gets boring and depressing very quickly, especially when you factor in the whole thing with people dying. So the world's gone through this very traumatic event, and we're not even completely out of it yet. And how can anyone think about video games at a time like this? But then I thought about you and all your excitement and energy and hope. And I remember what it felt like to know that you're doing exactly the thing you're meant to be doing with your life and even getting paid to do it. I'm not going to lie, I miss that feeling a lot. But I can't go back to it, not in the same way at least. I'm older now, and I've seen too much behind the metaphorical curtain. But I see glimpses of you in some of the young people I see getting started in games today. So I figured maybe some of what I want to tell you will also be useful to them and whoever else happens to be listening. I mean, I hope so, because it's not like I have any better keynote ideas. I'm going to tell you right now that among many other things, your career as a game designer isn't going to go quite like you'd planned. I know how meticulously you've been researching how to make it in games in hopes of becoming some kind of auteur figure like Tim Schafer. You started learning early as a teenager and released a game when you were 16, and now you're doing this internship while in the middle of finishing your computer science degree. You probably still have it in your head that you'll work your way up into leadership positions and start your own company someday. It makes sense that you believe this about yourself, like your particular combination of skills, interests, and class privilege meant that you were labeled a gifted child who could go on to do anything they wanted in life. Instead, what will actually happen is that you will work maybe a couple more game industry jobs and start to feel disillusioned, undervalued, and exploited. You will then shift your focus back to making games on your own by yourself, while supporting yourself through other jobs and freelance work. At some point in your mid-20s, the stars will align, and a game you make will get nominated for a few important indie game awards. It will not win any of them, but people will still be really impressed. You will go back to school, get a master's degree, and then you will attempt a PhD, but quit once you've done everything but the dissertation. Turns out everything that made you feel disillusioned, undervalued, and exploited in industry also exists in academia. Fancy that. All that being said, I don't mean to discourage you from pursuing your goals. It's not like I even can. You've always been very strong-willed and determined, almost to the point of obsession. It gets you to try things most people won't even think of attempting, to the point that even if you fail to accomplish what you set out to do, it'll still lead you to interesting places. And it gives you a reason to keep going and continue existing, even when everything else feels hopeless and wrong. See, I know there's a deep, dark loneliness inside of you, and that it's been there for almost as long as you've been able to form memories. Compared to most people, it's been harder for you to make and keep friends or understand why people behave the way that they do. You try your best to be a good person, but you often make them annoyed or upset without intending to. There are times when, out of nowhere, you feel an uncontrollable urge to cry, scream, and sometimes become violent. People have always said it's because you're immature and seeking attention, even though you don't do it on purpose and attention is the last thing you want. As you've grown older, you've been learning to structure your life in such a way that you're less likely to lose control. But the feeling remains that deep down inside, there's something horribly wrong with you. I know you'll spend the next 15 years looking for answers as to why you are the way that you are. And while I wish I could just give you the cheat codes I've managed to find so far, it's not like you'd be able to absorb the information without actually experiencing it in real time. And besides, maybe some even older version of me is about to pop in and tell us we're both wrong. But just in case it helps, here's what you do figure out. One of the biggest reasons you're so drawn to designing and programming games is because thinking about the world in terms of systems and processes comes naturally to you. You particularly like games with a heavy emphasis on narrative, storytelling, and conversation, because it's your way of trying to reverse engineer and make sense of human interactions. While the extent to which this approach in understanding human behavior succeeds in a general sense is debatable, one thing it will do is put you in contact with a higher percentage of people who share your interests and think similarly to you. This is important because oftentimes the way we understand who we are is to see ourselves reflected in others. Your interest in systems, coupled with your deep-seated feelings of loneliness, will lead you to learning all you can about power, oppression, injustice, and privilege. Slowly, over the course of many years, you will transform from someone who fancies themselves apathetically apolitical to a full-blown leftist. This will make you very unpopular with some people, especially those with a lot of status and money. But it's not like you would have ever been happy in that kind of a social environment anyway. You will come to learn that the word respect has two meanings. The respect you naturally show towards every human being as an equal, and the respect a superior demands of you because you are inferior. Fortunately, your near complete inability to effectively perform the latter will make it easier to find those who appreciate the former. You'll become a feminist because you feel a deep discomfort with the many social expectations that come with being assigned female at birth. You'll think the reason you feel this way is solely because women are oppressed under the patriarchy. But then you'll discover that your feelings of discomfort run a lot deeper than that. You'll begin to come across words like genderqueer and non-binary, and finally it will start to make a lot more sense. See, right now, you already know a little bit about transgender people but you still have it in your head that you can't possibly be one because you didn't behave like a stereotypical boy growing up any more than you behaved like a stereotypical girl. I wish you could have known sooner that there were more options than just those two. But I guess society had to take its sweet time catching up first. And it certainly didn't help that the AIDS crisis deprived you of an entire generation of people who could have been your mentors in this regard. Once you hit your 30s, you will finally have access to surgery and hormones, things you didn't know you needed for a long time because trans healthcare was full of a lot more gatekeeping back then. I know that since you started puberty the first time, you've had this feeling like part of you is still stuck at about 12 years old, that even as you live longer than that, you're not really getting older, just gaining more experience. When you medically transition, that feeling will go away. And you'll actually be able to imagine yourself as an adult, growing older, looking the way you've always wanted, but were made to be too ashamed to admit to yourself. In parallel to this process, you'll also begin to figure out that you're autistic. When you first learn about what in your time is probably still called Asperger's syndrome, you'll both recognize and constantly second guess yourself. For a while, you'll continue to believe that it's somehow wrong to label yourself with something that is widely believed to be a disorder, as though naming it somehow means making excuses for yourself to behave badly. Part of you still thinks that all you need to do is try harder, that it's something you just need to overcome. But later on, you figure out the opposite. It turns out that when you understand that you have atypical sensory needs and are able to meet them as best as you can, interacting with other people and existing in the world actually becomes a lot easier. Who'd have thought? You'll eventually start to let go of this idea in your head that you're meant to be some kind of creative game-making genius, because you'll learn that your inherent worth as a human being isn't contingent on how productive you are, how many people buy or play the games you work on, or how many awards they get nominated for. Sure, you'll push yourself very hard throughout the rest of your 20s, but then you'll hit your limits and burn out, and it'll happen more than once. It'll be hard, but you'll still come out alive at the end of it. You'll understand that you need rest just like everyone else, and that other people aren't lazy or stupid for not accomplishing as much as you have. In fact, laziness and stupidity aren't even real concepts, so much as post hoc justifications for perpetuating systemic inequality. You will come to learn that the struggles you'll have at the various jobs you'll hold and fail to hold aren't just limited to those particular workplaces, but are a consequence of neoliberal capitalism, a paradigm that took hold just before you were born, but has become so ubiquitous that it feels like human nature. The effects of this ideology haven't yet played out to their fullest, and you've been sheltered from a lot of them so far. But the first thing you will notice is that the year you graduate from university, there will be an economic recession that will cause your generation to be the first in a long time to be worse off than your parents. From there on, the gap between the rich and the poor will only get wider and wider, and you'll notice that oftentimes putting up with abusive, power-tripping bosses is the price you have to pay to make anything near a living wage. And that, of course, becomes harder the less normal you are. So you can probably guess how well that goes for you. You'll also begin to understand the extent to which white supremacy influences your worldview and how much that has hurt you. Given that you're not white yourself, you'll believe you can't possibly be racist, but then you'll understand that your upper middle class upbringing hinged on assimilating into whiteness as much as possible. You'll stop believing that you're inherently superior to those fresh off the boat immigrants who haven't been able to assimilate like you have, let alone the Black and Indigenous people who have experienced the worst traumas of settler colonialism. You'll stop believing in things like individualism and the idea that the best way to know things is through rational debate. And you'll also stop being a grammar prescriptivist. Thank goodness, because a lot of people found that very annoying. Also, all the ironic and edgy racist jokes saturating the media and the internet in your time, they're going to stop being funny real quickly once people start realizing that for a shocking number of people, they aren't just jokes. You'll put everything you learn about yourself and the world you live in into the games you make. And in the same way that you learn about yourself by seeing yourself reflected in others, others will learn about themselves by seeing themselves reflected in you. You'll realize that this is the reason why pride is so important. When you are brave enough to openly express who you are and what you desire in a society that deems those things unacceptable, you open up a much larger possibility space for people who share those feelings. And if enough of you join together in solidarity, you can change the culture around you for the better. It won't be easy to make this change, especially when there are still many powerful people who have a lot to gain by keeping you oppressed, but at least you won't be alone. Also, this may come as a surprise to you, but you actually have really good social skills, and they will only get better with time. I know autistic people are stereotyped as having terrible social skills, but that's only if you measure them against neurotypical standards. You will make a lot of friends from all over the world because you have a knack for attracting weird oddball nerds who make sense to you in ways that most people don't. The deep loneliness you feel in your heart may not go away entirely, but it'll gradually start to heal. And finally, during the pandemic year, when everyone gets stuck at home, you will start your own company, just like you eventually hoped you would. But you won't be the boss or the CEO. Instead, oh, that's my cat. Hello. This is Neko, everyone. Okay, where was I? But you won't be the boss or the CEO. Instead, it will be a worker co-op that you share with two of your friends. From where I am, it's still too early to tell how it's going to go, but I have really high hopes. What I do know is that your co-founders are super talented and prolific game designers in their own right, and you will come to trust and respect them deeply. Also, the excitement you'll feel around the awesome projects you'll work on together won't hurt either. That's about all I've got for now, at least as far as I'm willing to share publicly. But if there's one piece of advice I hope actually makes it to you, it's this. You may feel deeply lonely, but you are also capable of feeling a deep sense of joy. Especially from this kitty. You're already familiar with this feeling. You feel it when you're working on projects you truly care about, or when you're absorbed in learning about something that fascinates you, or when you're around people who make you feel like you belong. When you find this feeling, savor the moment and follow it to wherever it leads. There's so much that's terrifying and horrible about the world, and trust me, it's only going to get worse. So might as well take whatever joy you can find, because that's how you will create for yourself a life worth living. Love? And I know neither of us uses the word love lightly, so please understand how sincerely I mean it. 35-year-old Squinky. Yes, so that's the keynote. Thank you. Thank you for listening. I'm happy to do a Q&A. Ask me anything within reason. So yeah, if you have questions, comments, complaints, please let's hear them. More cat appearances. Here, I'll give you a better view of Neko. Okay, so my question is, what's your dream project? Oh my goodness, I have like an entire document full of project ideas. If you like, I can pull it up and read some of them to you. So let me just find it. Okay. So yeah, I mean, like, I don't have just one dream project, but I have a bunch of ridiculous ideas. So like, yeah, here's a list. 80s exercise video, a game using Mr. Sketch markers, a game you can play in the bath, A town, well, where everyone is trans but stealth and no one knows anyone else is trans. Argumentative GPS couple. Audio drama where you choose which characters to follow and go to real world locations optionally. Awkward silence video chat. But how do you win? Carbon 14 dating sim. Concert where performers write sheet music by hand and pass it to the audience. Courtroom drama, except they're trying to determine whether a relationship was abusive. Dance scene that doesn't let you rehearse. Different one-on-one conversation permutations in an ensemble cast. Dream-based marketing. English dub censorship game. Eye contact is painful and distracting. Fake MLM selling white men's tears. First-person makeover experience. Flirting except you're really bad at it. IKEA performance art. Jazz chess. Judith Butler and Donna Haraway in a hot tub. Make room for Jesus. Marching band dating sim. Marina Abramovich Disney movie. Massively collaborative dating sim. Psychonauts unauthorized remake. Record your dreams and post them online. Replacing yourself with a bot. Revenge store. Robots need trans sisters. Sensory overload chamber. Soap opera, cyclical not linear plot. Toilet games zine. Triangle hero. VR hair braiding. Wilfred Owen, World War I poetry game jam. All right, so between all of those things, there must be some kind of dream project in there somewhere. Okay. Standing by. Oh, audio's still running. Okay. Not have like an actual audience that I can see. Yeah. Really weird. So weird. Aw. Oh, lots of love for Neko. Thank you. Thank you. Neko appreciates it, or at least they would if cats could appreciate distant humans sending them love from afar. Which honestly, I think like if I were a cat, I'd be too overwhelmed with like people like getting all up in my space in person. So maybe it's better that they are getting remote love. So thank you all for that. Yeah, that's all I think. Cool, cool. Well, Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for tuning in from wherever you are in the world. Neko saying goodbye as well. Yeah, it's almost time for food. So yeah, more cat cam. All right. It's the Squinky and Neko show. Okay. Yeah. If that's all, like, yeah, thank you.